Well, Alberta Premier Rachel Notley will be a no-show at the annual Western Premiers Conference this week. That, of course, as the Trans Mountain Pipeline dispute with BC drags on. Notley says it would be tone-deaf for her to engage with BC on other issues while it's trying to choke off the economic lifeblood of Alberta. Our next guest says Alberta has shouldered the burden for other provinces for decades, and it's now time for the province to get a fairer deal from Canada. Former Wildrose Party leader Brian Jean joins us now. Thanks for being with us.
Thanks for having me.
So let's start with, because you actually wrote an op-ed and put some numbers around this that I think would surprise some Canadians, just in terms of the extent to which Alberta disproportionately has fed into equalization, Confederation. Why do you think Canadians aren't more aware of that?
I think most Canadians aren't aware because obviously the other provincial leaders don't bring it to their attention and the federal government won't either. Just take, for instance, 2014, Alberta actually paid over $28 billion in taxes and that we didn't receive any services whatsoever from the federal government for. And this is not unusual for Alberta. During my entire lifetime, we've been a net recipient of equalization very few times, very, very little, I think significantly less than any other province, and we're the only one that is. It's just a conversation we need to have. We need to have it because it's coming about here in Alberta to be quite a bitter situation. We are not given our constitutional rights to put our pipelines across other provinces, and yet we continue to pay into equalization a disproportionate amount of money. We continue to discount our oil by 30% and to the Americans because that's our only customer. And this is a national agenda item. It should be on the top of the national agenda to get a pipeline through to Tidewater. And of course, I think the most important thing that we could have done was Energy East, making sure that we take off independence or dependence of oil from other countries like Saudi Arabia and Venezuela. And I think it's very clear what's happening in the markets today that we need to do that. We need to do that as soon as possible. Yeah,
that was something else that you laid out. And for people that are interested, it's worth actually going and reading the op-ed as you wrote it, because the one thing that struck me is we know the list of pipelines that have been shuttered either by their parent company, as in the case of Energy East, or by government regulations. But when it's laid out like that, and I think the argument you're making in your piece is Alberta and the energy industry didn't get the support that it deserves, sort of politically, the political capital it deserves for the benefit of all Canadians. And put in that lens, I think Canadians would see it slightly differently, which again brings me back to why it's not spun that way more often.
Well, to be fair, Amanda, let's think about this for a minute. We have tanker traffic, U.S. oil going up and down Canada's coast in Canadian coastal waters every single day from Alaska, between Alaska and the mainland U.S. And yet we couldn't put through Northern Gateway Pipeline. We, for instance, cannot have Canadian tankers or Canadian oil in any tankers off our west coast. Now, how logical is that given that the Americans go along the same water lines, have not as high safety standards as we do in Canada, and can cause the same problems? Kinder Morgan has been 60 years free from any type of oil incident involving tankers. We have the safest industry in the world, and we need, as Canadians, to have that conversation and make sure that we recognize that although this natural resource belongs to the people of Alberta, we have equalization and we all share in the burden of our great country and in life generally. And we need to work together to do that. And right now with equalization the way it is, to make it fair, we need to take out non-renewable resources, for instance our oil, and at least have the same treatment as the people of Quebec who have their hydropower subsidized, for instance, the renewable resource that continues to give, and yet it's not included, that subsidization is not included in equalization. It would be equivalent to all Albertans driving up to a gas station and receiving a liter of oil for about 30 cents a liter. Now, I like the sound of that, but that's not free market, and that's not good for our economy, and it's not good long term. But that's what's happening in other places in Canada, and that's why we're being treated unfairly, and it needs to stop.
But so in the context of all of this, just this kind of reality, economic reality of where Alberta sits in the middle of Confederation, does it make sense when you're arguing that we are a federal family, and the point is to recognize that and the way we rely on one another, does it make sense to choke off the supply of oil or gas from the province of Alberta to the province of BC, or does it undermine that very case altogether?
It undermines the entire country and our constitutional rights under our Constitution. The Constitution allows, gives us obligations and it gives us rights. And we have a right to go into other territories and export our products across into tidal waters. I can't imagine what Canadian forefathers would think of this current situation where we have actual provinces next to us, governments next to us that block our oil.
We've only got a couple of seconds here, but I'm actually asking about the opposite, the threat by Alberta to choke off supply to BC. Is that the right thing to do under these circumstances?
I think right now we have to look at whatever's available to us in the box, because we need to do something different than what we're doing. Rachel Notley has a challenge in front of her, and I think her political fortunes ride on that pipeline in particular, and she's set that out as to happen for her. I don't know what's going to happen, but I do know that action has to take place, because Justin Trudeau is doing nothing for Alberta right now and has done nothing since he got elected.
All right, Brian Jean, we appreciate you joining us for this.